In this lesson, we're going to talk about 4 main types of blues turnarounds that you really need to be familiar with. Let's get started by talking about the first blues turnaround that we're going to cover today, and this is super important. In fact, I think this should be the first turnaround that you ever learn. It's very useful. You're going to hear it in like that classic blues sense, like Sweet Home Chicago, that kind of stuff. So let's give it a listen, and we'll talk about what makes this kind of a bigger archetype of blues turnarounds. Okay, so we're really starting here at this little E7 shape here. It comes from this D7 shape. You move it up into E, we've got an E7. We're really starting out with the open E. This is in the key of E. And we're going to roll through the top 3 strings with some triplets. And then flatten this entire chord. And so this is where we're starting to get that sense of chromaticism, where we're just moving down a half step at a time, okay? Another set of triplets. Do it again before resolving here. And this is the top of an E chord, right? So we've got our G sharp, our B, and our E. So again, we've got that descending line that resolves into E. That's our key center. So that's a really good moment, but we punch it up by getting into our 5 chord, the B7 in this case. And that's sort of a real familiar structure to a blues turnaround. We've got this falling chromatic piece here. We resolve momentarily on the 1 chord, in our case E, and then we end with the 5 chord before starting back over. That's the whole point of a turnaround, is to kind of get you out of the end of a progression and loop you back in to the top of the progression. Cycle through with bar 1 of, say, a 12-bar blues. So this one is super important. And you don't have to stop there. We can take this descending chromatic thing a little bit further, maybe leave out some of that, but keep the bones the same, and you might come up with something like this. So hear how in that example we've still got kind of the same feel. We left out some of it, we gave it a little more space, but knowing that first sort of archetype of a blues turnaround, this chromatic descending line, really helps us to kind of broaden our scope a little bit. That gives us a nice anchor point, but you can certainly get creative. Now we're going to move on to the second type of a blues turnaround. And what we're going to do here is definitely different. Let's keep this in E for some consistency here, but you're going to hear a familiar sound, but definitely different than this chromatic descent to the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, here what we did was we definitely employed that use of chromatics where we're falling down a half step at a time, but notice that the root, our E, which is here at the 12th fret in this example, stayed constant. It didn't move, whereas here we moved down to the E. We kind of fell into the E. What we did here was we pedaled the E. And pedaling is just a term for kind of keeping that root cycling back through and kind of alternating through the pitches here. So what I'm doing is kind of pinching on the 4th string 12th fret and the 1st string 12th fret. And the chromatic aspect is happening here on the 4th string. Definitely still has that classic Robert Johnson style vibe to it, and this is definitely one that you should know. And then we also use that 5 chord in the 2nd bar of this. Here what we do is walk up into our B here on the 9th fret of the 4th string before putting down this B7 shape here. Very similar to that E. If you move it all the way up here, we've got a B7, and it's kind of in that same register or zone or position on the fretboard before resolving to our E. Again, this is meant to kind of carry you back into the top of a progression. This being up high serves as a really good intro or ending for a song, and you're going to hear that in a lot of Robert Johnson tunes. And we've done this in E so far, but you can certainly move this around. Another popular place to play this is in A. So if you grab here at the 5th fret, just move this whole thing down from 12 to 5, you can do that same pattern. And again, just a lot of pinching and keeping that root, which is on top here, singing bright throughout the turnaround. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. What you can do here to add a little bit of your own flavor is just kind of play with the pedal tone. You can certainly do that. Don't necessarily have to hit it as regimented as this. The other thing that you can do, and you'll hear this in some Robert Johnson stuff, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. This is a really cool way to add just a little bit of creativity to this, and once you get down to here, do this a little pull off. This works great in A, where you pull off from 3 to 2 and then open on the 1st string on your way to that 5 chord, E or E7, and then back into the top of the progression. Okay, you could just jump right in with the shuffle here. Now this next style of turnaround is just a lick-based turnaround. You're going to hear this in songs like Pride and Joy by Stevie Ray Vaughan and countless others, especially when you get into electric blues, but there's no reason you shouldn't know this and no reason you can't pull it off on the acoustic guitar. Here's an example of one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So there you go, there's a lick that definitely carries you through those final 2 bars. We're working in the key of E there, but notice that we did still feature the 5 chord at that end, that little climb. It's a great way to make a statement that you're at the end of the progression, is hitting that 5 chord. Not necessary, but definitely something really cool. The final type of turnaround that we're going to cover here is just fascinating to me. And it's got a little bit of counterpoint or contrapuntal movement. That's a fun word to say, right? But what really that means is that we've got sort of 2 different lines happening. And I think one of the best examples is this, which I've got a lesson on called The Sweetest Turnaround Ever. I love this sound. But listen when I play it, if you've got an ascending line and a descending line happening at the same time. All right, did you notice how the 2nd string was going down while the bass was climbing, right? So this was happening on the 2nd string, the higher note in this, whereas the bass was doing this. Very cool when those start to sort of converge and move in opposite directions as you're working your way through this turnaround. I've got another one that definitely has a little more of a ragtime feel to it, so you can go back to older ragtime blues and you're going to hear this, and it's got sort of elements of that sort of counterpoint or that ascending and descending melodic content to it. Here's what this one looks like. Okay, so this is a counterpoint, kind of crossing, converging lines type of turnaround as well, but it's got more of a ragtime feel. You can definitely hear that flavor happening. But what I'm doing is starting out in G. So there's my first beat, and then I'm on each of the next 3 beats, I'm going to do a chord. So this is a G7, top 4 strings. Then I'm going to descend on the bass and ascend on the 2nd string to hit a C major. Now I do have this G on top. It's going to stay there. So that's like a C major chord with a G on the 1st string, right? Then we flatten the bass and come up again on the 2nd string to this 7th chord shape. We've used this before in the lesson. This is an E flat 7 chord. before finally coming to a G. So this sort of gets us down to the D note here. And we hit this big G before hitting our 5 chord. Again, a staple of these turnarounds is putting that 5 chord in the final measure before headed back to the top of the next. It just begs to resolve to 1, which makes it a great setup for your 1 chord, bar 1 of a typical progression. If you're a premium member, you're going to have access to download the tab that accompanies this to give you the notes of each of these turnarounds. I know we didn't dive deep into the exact picking and where you put your finger and all of that, so definitely try to check out the tab. But I really want you to focus on the types, and sort of categorizing the turnarounds in this way will help you recognize them and then know the sound, the characteristics of each of these types, and that'll help you decode things as you're listening to your favorite tunes and trying to get them down into your own playing. At least it helped me, so I wanted to share this with you. There are probably other types of turnarounds, and if you hear one, I'd love for you to drop a comment below and let me know what tune it came from. I'll go listen to it. I'm constantly trying to collect some cool turnarounds, so I'd appreciate it if you do that. If you dig this video, consider hitting the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. I'll be back here next Tuesday for another acoustic blues lesson. Until then, practice smart and play on.